Hi everyone, welcome back. I hope you had a great week. This week in Level E, we will be working on lessons 73 through 76. You will need warm-up practice sheets 1 and 2, worksheets 46 through 49, the 4-in-1 ruler, a meter stick, the activities for learning abacus, 1 centimeter cube, the math card games book, and the corners card deck. In lesson 73, we will practice reading rulers and informally adding and multiplying fractions. Have your child do the first multivide on the practice sheet, and please remind your child to use check numbers to avoid all that frustration if they've made a mistake higher up in the problem and then they get to division and end up with remainders. We don't want that. If your child is like mine and takes forever to do the multivide, not because he doesn't understand it, but just because he takes a long time to do it, you may want to do it at the end of the lesson or at any other point in your day when you're busy doing something else and you can just hand your child the multivide to work on. Have your child find the tenths of an inch scale on the 4-in-1 ruler. Then follow the lesson and ask your child to show you with fingers or hands how long various lengths are, such as 5 inches, 9 inches, etc. This may seem unnecessary if you feel like your child is familiar with measurements, but something special happens when the child is able to physically show a length. It just makes the size more real somehow. And your child may be very familiar with working with measurements on paper, with just numbers, but it really helps it stick in the brain if they can imagine what something looks like. Okay, what some kind of measurement looks like. So as tempting as it may be to skip that part of the lesson, I wouldn't. On worksheet 46, your child will be finding perimeters using inches and centimeters with fractions. After the worksheet, you can ask the in conclusion questions and then play corners with tenths, which is game F22.2 in the math card games book. For lesson 74, we will be working with the terms meter, yard, and decimeter, as well as hundredths. The warm-up is the second multivide on practice sheet 1. And at the bottom of the first page in the lesson book, we are measuring using the abacus, which might surprise you that we could do that. Each bead represents 1 centimeter and actually measures out as a centimeter, so that's pretty neat. Let's look at what entering fractions of a meter looks like on the abacus.
Okay, so it's already been established in the lesson that each of these beads is worth 1 centimeter. Just previous to where we're starting at entering fractions of a meter, the book tells you to tell your child to imagine putting all the beads in a row on a long wire. How long in centimeters is that row? And they'll have come to the conclusion that it's 100 centimeters long, which of course is 1 meter. So now we're going to be asking your child to enter 2 hundredths on the abacus. So that would just look like that. 2 beads, 200. And you could have them do various numbers, 4 hundredths, 9 hundredths, for example. Okay, next, after we're dealing with hundredths, we're going to ask for tenths. So we're going to enter 2 tenths of a meter, which is that, 4 tenths of a meter, and 9 tenths of a meter. And then we're going to discuss how 2 tenths of a meter is actually 21 hundredths of a meter. So let's go back to that. Here's the 2 tenths. That would also be 21 hundredths, because remember, each one of these is 1/100th of a meter. 4 tenths of a meter is also 41 hundredths of a meter. 9 tenths of a meter is 91 hundredths of a meter.
Okay, after this exercise, have your child complete the worksheet independently. Ask the in conclusion questions and play corners with tenths. In lesson 75, we'll be subtracting tenths and hundredths. The warm-up is the first multivide on practice sheet number 2. After a quick review of metric measurements, we will go over measuring on the abacus, which is what we just did, and then how to subtract tenths and hundredths on the abacus. So let's take a look at that.
Okay, so on the first page of lesson 75, under measuring on the abacus, the book tells you to write out the equation 4/10 minus 1/100th equals. And we're going to show that on the abacus. So here we have entered 4/10, also known as 41/100ths, right? So this is 4/10, but we don't have to actually have the students find the common denominator right now. We can just do this intuitively with the abacus. So 4/10 minus 1/100th would simply look like this. So my answer would be 39/100ths. Okay, so this is a very concrete way of teaching your child how to subtract with tenths and hundredths without having to have them physically write down the common denominator and multiply and whatnot.
Which of course we will get to that, finding a common denominator and subtracting, but not at this point. Now your child can complete the worksheet, ask the in conclusion questions, and then choose your favorite game to play. For lesson 76, we will be adding tenths and hundredths using the abacus vertically. The warm-up is another multivide. Remember, if your child drags his feet on completing these, you can save it for the end of the lesson or at any time when you're busy with something else. Let's look at using the abacus to work with tenths and hundredths.
So we're going to be using the abacus a little bit differently than normal. We're going to go make sure that the activities for learning logo is up in the right hand corner, and then turn the abacus just 90 degrees. So we're not using the second side of the abacus, but we are using the first side vertically, just like we would the second side. And now I'm going to place this centimeter cube right here in the center at the top of the abacus. If you're curious, there is a little, from the frame being made, there's a little dot right here in the center, just a piece of broken off plastic, which is normal and is on your abacus. And that might be good enough to just point that out to your child, but the centimeter cube is a little bit more obvious. It's bigger. You could also just put a sticker there, a little tiny dot sticker, or use a permanent marker and put a dot there. That would be fine as well. So this will represent a decimal point. Everything to the right of the cube will be tenths and hundredths. Everything to the left will be ones and tens. Okay, so for example, if I want to enter 4/10, I would use these two wires just to the right of the cube. That would be 4/10. 600ths, I would be using the far to right wires. That would be 600ths. So if I wanted to enter 4600ths, I would need to enter 4/10 and 600ths. Now let's say that I wanted to have a whole number in addition to that. So let's say I was doing 23 and 4600. That's how you can use the abacus to show decimals of tenths and hundredths.
So after your child completes the worksheet, ask what pattern did you see while you were completing that? It's a very neat visual on how tenths and hundredths actually compare to each other. Then you can play the corners with tenths game as you've been playing, but with a variation this time. So instead of everything being tenths, the top and bottom numbers are tenths, and the left and right numbers, when you combine those are hundredths. Okay, so the game will actually, everybody's going to be going for the tenths because that's bigger. You want the higher score. So it's going to be interesting to see that the cards, most of them are played in a long line with very few played on the right and left. So then ask your in conclusion questions, and you could do that either before or after the game. Then you're done for this week, and we'll see you next time. Thanks so much. Bye-bye.